Innocence Project. And we just want to thank all of the other incredible organizations who have presented today during Wrongful Conviction Day. You can find out more about all of the justice and accountability issues that we've been learning about at wrongfulconvictionday.org. We are so excited to be the newest member of the Innocence Network, and we just wanted to take a few minutes to introduce ourselves as an organization.
Absolutely. Thank you, Suzanne. So just before we start talking about Tennessee law and exonerations, and we're going to hear from Jason Strong shortly, who has an incredible story and has been so generous with his time in educating people across Tennessee about wrongful convictions. But just for people that are like, Tennessee's new to the network, can you tell us a little bit about the history of Tennessee?
I would love to. I might be biased, but I'm a native Tennessean, and I think that Tennessee is an amazing state. It is a beautiful state. We're really geographically diverse, and we are divided into 3 grand divisions. We have West Tennessee, Middle Tennessee, where we're located, and East Tennessee. And every part of the state has just wonderful people, an incredible cultural history, and any Tennessean would be the first to remind you that every part of the state has a very important musical history as well. What people might not know if they're not from here is that every part of the state also has a really important social justice history of which we are very proud. If you think about Ida B. Wells, the journalist, she spent much of her career campaigning against segregation and leading an anti-lynching campaign in Memphis. Leaders like John Lewis and C.T. Vivian and Diane Nash began their civil rights careers as students here in Nashville, organizing sit-ins and marches and freedom rides. And over in beautiful East Tennessee, the Highlander Center has trained generations of organizers like Rosa Parks in the labor and civil rights and immigrant rights movements. And then just this past August, we celebrated the centennial of the 19th Amendment, which secured women's right to vote. And that passed after ratification in Tennessee, here in Nashville in 1920. So that was a big deal, that centennial. So, we have this incredible foundation of leadership and of history on which to build in Tennessee. And I know, we all know that there is much in our state's history that is challenging, and that there is a huge amount of work still to do. But that's why organizations like ours exist. That's why all of the organizations in the Innocence Network that we've heard about from today exist.
Exactly. And we launched in 2019 as the first full-time Innocence organization and stand on the shoulders of many people across the United States and the world who have built an innocence movement and have really worked tirelessly to promote and let people know about these issues. But the Tennessee Innocence Project, even though it was launched full-time in 2019, does have a long history before we started. In 2000, with support and guidance from attorneys across the state of Tennessee, and the Tennessee Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers as well, the nonprofit organization was launched at the UT Knoxville College of Law, and proud that we have our roots there in Knoxville, where we got started. And that existed from 2009 to 2018 as part of the legal clinic there, but was really instrumental in getting the 2001 Post-Conviction DNA Act passed in the state legislature, which allows us to get back into court if there's DNA evidence that we can test, which is a tremendous asset to us when we have cases with DNA. But in 2019, there was a discussion that we really needed to make this a statewide project. We needed to be from the Smoky Mountains all the way over to the banks of the Mississippi. And with the help of numerous attorneys from across the state, we made this a full-time organization. And just this summer, we became a member of the Innocence Network. So very exciting for us to be part of Wrongful Conviction Day here today. So there's a long history of people doing this work in Tennessee, but not quite in this form. Yeah. And we don't have quite as many exonerations as some of the other states that neighbor us.
We don't, and that's concerning to us. We know that Tennessee has only seen 23 exonerations in state courts. That's according to the National Registry of Exonerations that tracks that data. those exonerees served a combined 238 years for crimes they didn't commit. So, as a side note, in 2020, the Tennessee Department of Corrections average to house a person for a single day is $80. So that's a significant financial cost to the state. The cost to exonerees is just astronomical. All those years wrongfully incarcerated, everything they missed, births, weddings, graduations, funerals, just all of those daily moments in life that they missed. Those are priceless. And the dollar cost to the state and to taxpayers for wrongful convictions is millions of dollars.
And for those people, for the families, their friends, priceless.
Priceless.
You can't put an amount on that.
Yeah. So only 11 of those 23 exonerations occurred in the last decade, meaning we're really only averaging about an exoneration a year here in Tennessee. And unfortunately, it's not because we're doing justice any better on the front end here.
Absolutely. And more than 2,600 people have been exonerated to date. And that may not include people who are not on the registry, were not put on the registry or for other reasons. But of the nearly 2,700 people that have been exonerated, more than 60% are people of color. Yet in Tennessee, we defy those statistics in the opposite direction. Of the 23 exonerees that Tennessee has had, 15 are white and 8 are black. And that really does not align with what we're seeing nationwide. So that's something that we'll be looking at as we sort of chart our journey forward. But there are a lot of challenges. Every state, I think one thing we've heard today is that it is really difficult to undo a wrongful conviction. It doesn't matter where you are. But those challenges are particularly tough in Tennessee. Getting someone to hear the claims that you could be actually innocent, you've got to carefully maneuver back into a courtroom. And if you plead guilty in Tennessee, the law has been limited over the past several years. So really, if you've pled guilty, even if you were saying, I didn't do it, but I need to plead guilty for these reasons, or I've been advised to plead guilty, the only way you can really get back into court at this juncture is through a DNA testing petition. And one thing that we know is that DNA is not present in that many wrongful convictions. Having DNA, even if it might have existed in the case at one point, maybe that evidence hasn't been preserved anymore, especially if it's a particularly old case. So there are real challenges if someone pled guilty and they write us and ask for help for us to figure out how we can get a judge to even hear their claims. Even if someone had a jury trial, so let's say they exhausted the entire process, they didn't plead guilty, they had a trial, and they want to come back into court, it's still really difficult. And so that's something that we hope in the coming years, maybe Tennessee can change, or the laws, to just make it easier so that someone can even hear the arguments and the reasons why we believe someone are innocent. After someone gets convicted in Tennessee, they get what's called a direct appeal, and that's a process that can last several years usually. And then after that, within a year of them finishing that direct appeal, then there's something called post-conviction. And that's the juncture at that point moving forward where the Tennessee Innocence Project really gets involved. We've heard about different types of cases today. The Tennessee Innocence Project, we take DNA cases, as you know, we take non-DNA cases. So maybe there's just investigation that we have to do, but we look at all different types of cases, scientific in nature or not. But after someone gets convicted, after they start this post-conviction process, it can take a lot of money. And I think Jason Strong's going to be joining us a little bit, and that's part of his story. Is, he for a while became his own attorney and was fighting his own battles, because you may be appointed someone in post-conviction. At this point, if you're saying you're innocent, you didn't actually commit the crime, you may be appointed an attorney, or in certain jurisdictions in Tennessee, attorneys are not routinely appointed, so you might just be fighting your case on your own. And meanwhile, you're saying you're innocent and you didn't do this and you need help. So one thing that we look at is, why is Tennessee further behind than other states? And a part of that is that we don't have consistent representation for people making claims of actual innocence. But not only that, once someone gets appointed to your case, it's very possible that they could be a very young attorney. Maybe they haven't had a lot of experience in the courtroom. Maybe you're asking them to challenge the results of your jury trial, but they've never had a jury trial themselves. I mean, can you imagine that?
No.
It's unfathomable.
It's terrifying.
So That's one thing that we do is we can provide seasoned legal experience working with a wide array of pro bono partners in Tennessee to make sure that someone gets the legal resources they need. What people always find shocking is that in Tennessee, you may be appointed attorney to represent you during post-conviction, which can take 2, 3, 4 years. And I think that's something that we've also heard when you watch, if you've watched the Innocence Files on Netflix. These cases can take 5, 10, 15 years. And so for all of the work that an attorney would be asked to put in on an actual innocence case, they're going to be compensated $1,000 for many years worth of work. And it could be, endless hours to try to fight a wrongful conviction. Not only that, but the other key factor in Tennessee is that attorneys that are appointed to post-conviction are not given expert witnesses. They're not given investigators to go out and actually look into the claims that are being made. So it doesn't matter if at trial, the trial attorney, it doesn't matter if they failed to do any investigation or if they failed to get an expert witness. Either way, you're not set up for success.
You're not.
So when I talk to people about the work that it takes to actually overturn a conviction, some of the things that I reference are the podcast Serial or Making a Murder. People are really familiar with those. And so I talk to them about how much work goes into creating those investigative experiences. And then there's litigation that follows after that. And then in Tennessee, attorneys are going to be compensated $1,000. Doesn't matter how complicated the case is, how complex it is. It doesn't matter how much the defendant says, I didn't do this, this wasn't on me. There's no resources, no experts, no investigators, no one to help out. And that's where we really come in, because there is not another source in the state of Tennessee for people that are claiming I'm actually innocent and I really need some help. So I'm not telling you anything you don't know, Suzanne. It's a really difficult process. And we are on ground zero of trying to make a change.
Because we know that wrongful convictions happen all over the country. We know that in the US alone, there have been almost 2,700 people wrongfully convicted. They've collectively spent nearly 24,000 years incarcerated for crimes they didn't commit. It's a staggering and heartbreaking number. We also know that Tennessee's exoneration rate is lower than other states with similar incarceration rates. We've had only 23 exonerations from state courts, as I've said, in Tennessee. And Tennessee rates 18th in the country in terms of incarceration.
So the wrongful convictions are there.
The wrongful convictions are here.
All right, so next, Jason Strong is going to join us.
Yes.
And he's going to tell us a little bit about his incredible story and his tenacity to change wrongful convictions.
Yeah, we've been so fortunate having Jason pushing us forward.
Jason, can you tell us about your case? It's a detailed case. There's a lot of events as part of it. I'm just going to, if you're okay with it, just tell us about it.
Sure. I suppose I should start with the victim, right? So in December, around December 9th of 1999, there was an unidentified woman's body discovered in the forest preserve in Lake County, Greenbelt Forest Preserve. They started an investigation into what happened to her, ran through numerous leads, never came up with anything, and then they eventually came knocking on my door. Why did they come knocking on my door? Well, I think it's a couple reasons. One is, I worked in an adult bookstore. I lived kind of in a shady area, so that draws attention. I wasn't a saint, I had long hair, tattoos, I did drugs and partied a lot, so, I'm a target there. And so I go through they arrest me. I'm freaking out. I had no idea what was going on. It's like 11 o'clock at night. I'm hanging out with my girlfriend and her friend. We're smoking a little weed, having some drinks. And I get a knock on the door, and I think it's just my buddy from down the way, And I go to open the door, and it's a bunch of cops. They all got their guns drawn, shoved in my face. They push me into the room, throw me down, handcuff me. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And nobody's telling me anything. And so I'm confused, I'm scared, my girlfriend's crying, and I have no clue what's happening. And they get me down to the police station and they start interrogating me. And at first, as an innocent person, you're thinking, well, I want to cooperate with the police. I didn't do anything wrong. So, you sign a form, says you'll talk to them. You want to cooperate and resolve this. But as time goes on, you start to realize they're not your friend and they don't care what you have to say. They just want you to confess. And that is the truth of the matter. They just want a confession. If you say, I didn't do it 100 million times, doesn't matter. You're still guilty in their eyes. If you start to get to a point where you get angry because they don't listen to you. I got to a point where I was cussing at them because I told them so many times, I didn't do this. And they said, well, that's proof of my guilt. I'm showing my violent nature now. They would show me these photos of the autopsy and the victim's body where it was found, and they told me about my co-defendant making statements against me and my other friend making statements against me, and they lied and said they found evidence in my vehicle. And I'm like, I know none of that can be true, but you're starting to lose your focus on things now because you're scared and you're confused by what's happening. And you start to cry, you start to break down, and then they say, well, that's proof of your guilt. Now you're showing your remorse. So everything you do is designed against you in that scenario. And then they start to accuse people you love and care about. They understood right away that I was concerned about my girlfriend. So their last tact was to say, well, we think she's involved as well, and we're going to charge her. So finally, you get to a point after many hours of this. I'm telling you in a short time thing, but this is like went on throughout the night. I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I'm confused and scared. I don't know what to do. And I asked for an attorney numerous times. They would not give me one, said I couldn't afford one, which made me think that when I signed the paper to talk to them, that I was signing away my rights. I no longer had rights to an attorney. That's how they made me feel. And so finally you break and you give them what they want and you confess. And to give you an idea of just how drained I was, after I was done with them, I laid down on the floor and went to sleep. That's how drained of every bit of energy I was. I just couldn't even keep my eyes open anymore. I couldn't focus on it. I was just done. And so they booked me. I went to jail, had my trial, which obviously went completely sideways. I had terrible public defenders. They never listened to me. They basically presented my false confession as true. I had no option to testify on my own behalf. They never called any real witnesses to corroborate anything I was trying to tell them because they had accepted my false confession, right? So they did the state's job for them. I was convicted. Worst day of my life by far was the day I was actually convicted. And so I've sentenced 46 years, go to prison, you start the appellate processes. That is a long drawn out process. I went through numerous appeals. After the first couple, I ended up becoming my own lawyer and learning the law myself, filing my own briefs. Many years later, we get to a point where there's a turning point in the whole story. And that was the discovery of the victim's identity. So all that time, nobody knew who the victim was. They had this unidentified woman's body, but no clue who she was. And they had her body on ice for many years. They didn't even bury her for many years. And we finally figured out who she was. And in that moment, I knew things were going to change. And it was at the same exact time that I was preparing to go to federal court. And it just opened up the door to all this new information. We knew who she was, where she was from, who she associated with. We had alternative suspects. The police department where she was from, they were very helpful. There was a Sergeant Bosshart that was very friendly, cooperated with my family, gave us information. He didn't believe I was the guy. He thought it was these other people who we developed as alternative suspects. And so we moved forward, went to federal court, had a procedural issue, and the judge Could have gave me any attorney in the world. Could have gave me another, terrible public defender or appellate defender at this point. But he didn't. He called Tom Garrity, who was the director of the Bloom Legal Clinic at Northwestern Pritzker School of Law. And Tom came and got involved and took my case all the way. And from there out, it still took another 8 years, but from there out, we started to piece together what we felt really happened to this woman. And we don't have all the details. A lot of it's still kind of speculation because this will never be investigated, unfortunately, and I'll get to that in a moment. But basically what we came to understand is that she was a mentally handicapped woman who was able to live on her own, but her family kept tabs on her and made sure she was okay and all that. Well, she fell under the influence of this mother-daughter grifter team who had a long history of taking advantage of mentally handicapped and elderly people and things like that, and they would extort them for money and all of that. Well, somehow or another, they took her from her home, and she was with them. The last her family ever heard from her is, "They don't want me to talk to you." And that was around April or May of '99. So throughout the rest of that year, she was under the influence of these people who were torturing her and abusing her, as evidenced by the fact that all her injuries that were similar were in various stages of healing, and that she was starved and just in really bad shape health-wise in every factor. I mean, they just did not care about this poor woman. And at some point, there was a man that got involved, and he was crazy, like deranged crazy. He had came over from Cuba on the Castro boat deal back in the 80s and was literally insane. They sold her to him, from what we understand, which is kind of weird. I guess that from what we know, they convinced him to lay on some railroad tracks at some point and get his arm chopped off by a train, sue the state, get a bunch of money. Then they sold her to him for that money. But they kept them all together. You know what I'm saying? So they continued to extort her even after they sold her to him. When the trial happened, for me, they never knew that all this had happened just a few counties away. They had no clue who these other people were. But the county where she was from had started a missing person investigation. So they should have made that connection, but they never did. All right. But when they were doing the missing person investigation, the reason it happened, it was always odd to us. So the daughter of the mother-daughter grifter team, and I'm sorry if this is confusing, I know it's a lot of working parts. The daughter of the mother-daughter grifter team, she, I guess they figured they got away with it. Hey, they got some guy locked up for this, he's going to trial, we're good, right? And nobody knows that she's dead because their victim is unidentified. So she posed as the victim's family member, going into the bank to try to get access to her bank accounts because the victim was still getting checks from the government, because nobody knew she was dead. She was just a missing person, right? Thankfully, the bank people realized that wasn't her family member. They knew her family. And so they called the police. And that's when the police in Carpentersville got involved, started the missing persons investigation, but never made that connection for many years. And one of the things they did was they went and talked to the husband that she was sold, the guy she was sold to. And where he was a mental institution / jail, right? For assaulting somebody. And they were questioning him about, again, a missing person. But he was adamant that she was murdered in December of '99. Now, to them at the time, that meant nothing. But later, when we got all this information and the connections were made, we were like, well, wow, that's pretty damning. Like, who just guesses that and keeps repeating that? That's kind of odd. So that officer that was involved in that investigation worked very closely with us. So we had all this information moving forward, and that's when we started to get help from the other side. The Attorney General's office, because we were in federal court, they were involved. They reached out to us. There was a new state's attorney that had got elected on the idea that he wanted to investigate some of these innocence claims and create a conviction integrity unit. He got involved. He was having some rapport with one of my attorneys, Judy Royal, and all these factors kind of came together at the same time. And we all decided that, hey, there's a lot of weird stuff with this case. Let's relook at this. And they all agreed to reinvestigate. And one of the things that we did for that reinvestigation was each party got their own private pathologist, forensic pathologist. And all of those pathologists came back with the same conclusion, peer-reviewed, that it wasn't possible for me and my friends to have committed this crime. That the state's theory at trial, which was me and my buddies picked this woman up, tortured her, killed her, dumped her body the next day, couldn't have happened. She was actually dead a week before they found her body. Decomposition was slowed because of the fact that it was winter in Illinois. The injuries that led to her death were even further back than that. And it was also realized that a lot of the injuries that were similar were in various stages of healing, which indicated to them that she had been kept captive and tortured for weeks, if not months. Now, as I've already said, we believe that it was from around April or May to December, because that was the last time her family heard from her. So that's that whole time period, we believe she was being tortured by these people. So anyway, this evidence proved undeniably I could not have committed this crime. My confession was obviously false, and the judge vacated my conviction. Unfortunately, justice will never be achieved for that family. I feel bad for them, but the man that she was sold to, he is in a loony bin. He's never going to be competent enough to stand trial, so there's nothing they could do to him. The mother of the mother-daughter grifter team has passed away, so the only one left is the daughter, and she is a career criminal. She knows the ropes. She knows what to do. If they even wanted to bring her in, I mean, all she'd have to do is say it was them, not me. So all those things, basically closed off the end of my case, and I was allowed to go home. But unfortunately, like I said, she'll never get true justice. And as far as to why they were wrong on all the forensics, I was later told by my attorneys through depositions in my civil suit that the medical examiner at my trial never actually had a license to practice medicine or anything in a hospital. He went to some fly-by-night school in the Dominican Republic that was closed down for fraudulent practices, never sought, actual training in the States. And yet he's been practicing for all these years and still practices today. He just moved up to Wisconsin. So yeah, but
incredible
15
story.
and a half year nightmare, but we won. And I always knew I would. I always said, give me liberty or give me death. But I couldn't quote my poem, but I wrote a poem early on called I Shall Prevail. And it was basically my war cry to the state that I'm going to win this one day somehow. And I did. So, yeah, it's we got a lot of work to do on fixing our system, that is for sure. But I think the right way to approach it is remembering that we can work with the other side. It does not have to be a constant battle between the two. And when you do that, when you reach across and you work together, a lot of times you can find the truth much faster and easier, as we did when that finally happened.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us, for being part of the Tennessee Innocence Project, for helping us raise public awareness in our state, and for everything you've done for the Innocence movement. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm honored. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason, for joining us today. We're so grateful for your voice and that you're helping. People reach out to Jason all the time and ask for help, and he's there to point them in our direction. And we're so incredibly thankful for the team that we've built here, for our board of directors, for our advisory council. We are fortunate to work with law firms across the state of Tennessee, and we're building an army to fight wrongful convictions in the state. Finally, we just want to encourage you to support your local Innocence organization. We are also very grateful to be part of the Innocence Network and stand on the shoulders of giants in doing this work. Thank you for joining us today, and please visit our website at tninnocence.org for more information, and definitely go to the Wrongful Convictions Day website from the Innocence Network to get lots more information. Thanks.
Thank you.